Welcome, as I said, to this alumni session, the title of which is about securing early career opportunities in a values-aligned employer. What a fabulous topic. I know that resonates so strongly, in particular for our upcoming next generation of people who want to go into business and social enterprise, and for whom there is a real appetite and desire, and indeed, in many cases, um, a unequivocal want to work for an employer that is values aligned, values led. What that means, of course, is open to so many different interpretations. But we also know that that desire is not always easy to fulfill. Because how does one, particularly early on in the career, identify those employers that are genuinely aligned with values? How do you understand from what you can see from the outside, from news reports, company reports if they exist, but also if you're lucky enough to get to an interview, how do you sort of unpick? So delighted that Ollie Coles, as I said, one of our entrepreneurs in residence, has agreed to come and talk to us about this. Now, I'm sure many of you are attracted to the session, not just by the title, but by the fact that it's Ollie who's giving it. So, in case you have missed out on just a snapshot, and I don't know if Ollie will just elaborate when he kicks off, but Ollie is a multi-award winning entrepreneur, and has founded multiple businesses in a number of different areas. And I think, although accolades and awards aren't everything, I think it's telling when the Independent newspaper in 2021 identified Ollie as one of the 50 most inspirational people driving positive change in Britain. And I think for us in the room, that's really means that there's something we would like to listen to how Ollie manages to do that, has manages to do that. A number of highlights that we've flagged for about Ollie as well is that amongst the many campaigns that he's been involved in and spearheaded, one of which was the support for frontline workers in the NHS and founding Hospitality for Heroes. So no doubt, fantastic for us to be able to be joined by Ollie. Okay, Ollie, that's it from me. We're joined by Darren as well, who is here from as head of our marketing. Thanks, Darren, for joining us also. Ollie, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And yeah, lovely introduction. And great to see some familiar faces again and to be with you today. So, yeah, I'll give a brief introduction to me and a bit about my background because I was also at Oxford Brookes 20 years ago. And Brookes is actually where I set up my first business, which didn't go anywhere or very far, but it was fun nonetheless. And it was actually a clothing company that I set up uh, within the university, and we would design different university society logos or alternative actual university logos, put them on t-shirts, put them on hoodies, and sell them. And that was before the day of social media marketing. So I was getting friends, photographing friends and printing them out on black and white paper and putting them up on campus and getting the occasional phone call. But it was a good experience. And it was also nice to walk down the Cowley Road and see people that I didn't know wearing my clothes. Um, so from there, since then, I've had a number of small businesses in varying sectors, spanning the investment management industry. Digital marketing is my longest standing business. I own a digital marketing agency in London, which I have owned since 2016. And I've had businesses in hospitality, travel, non-profits as well. And for me, a lot changed actually as we were approaching the pandemic, as Nicolette said, and I was just in the process actually of launching a startup in hospitality and travel uh, in 2019, December 2019, launched it, and then of course 3 or 4 months later, hospitality shut down, travel shut down. So I had time on my hands, and I saw a problem that needed solving, and that was frontline workers being fed. There was in the news there's a lot of talk about nurses really struggling to get access to healthy meals even before the first lockdown, as canteens were closing. And so I thought that there was a pretty simple solution, which was for the general public to support in buying produce, giving that produce to chefs who were going to be on furlough, who could prepare super healthy meals whilst restaurants were closed and put them into hospitals. And so I used my digital marketing experience to kind of kickstart that through an Instagram nominate challenge, which saw independent chefs sharing a 1-minute recipe and then to encourage sort of creative and healthy cooking at home, and then nominating other chefs to do the same thing. And I had actually identified a number of chefs along the path, knowing that if, within 4 or 5 nominations, there would be some celebrity chefs taking part in the campaign. And it went viral within a few weeks. It received 500,000, 1 million engagements, and raised a decent amount of money over the course of the year, £250,000 in public donations, which allowed us to provide 155,000 meals, I think, to 22 different hospitals across the country, including in Oxford. And I had to be super creative throughout that year, because demand was high. We were doing 15, 20,000 meals a week. And actually, of all the businesses I've been involved in, this, of course, was 100% volunteer-led, and all money went into feeding the NHS. But the team grew from 0 and an idea in my head to 50 within a week. And that just showed how amazing and sort of keen I think people were to support during a very, very challenging time. But the initiatives that I did, I published a book that year as well, made a recipe book, made up of recipes submitted to the Instagram campaign. I did a concert that was streamed into hospitals as a surprise on International Nurses Day. And all of these things gathered some pretty favourable press organically across the country. And that put me in front of some great opportunities, one of which was working for the Lord Mayor of London on a charity campaign, or a day that they do each year within the City of London, within the Square Mile. 200 or so organisations come together to raise money, or to encourage their employees to engage in fundraising initiatives on City Giving Day. But with 2 or 3 weeks' notice, the whole thing was not going to be in person, and they needed to make it virtual. So they came to me, and I came up with a way to make it virtual. And one of the users, or the companies that engaged in what I did for them, was PwC. And so PwC then came to me, this is 2021, asking if I could come up with a way of engaging their 30,000 UK employees in wellbeing initiatives. And so I designed and conceptualized and ultimately built for them a platform where their employees could come and they could set challenges for themselves or for their team, to say, right, I want to set myself a challenge to walk 2 kilometers every lunchtime. And for PwC, this was helpful because it was encouraging their employees to go out and do something whilst they were working remotely, to engage with other team members, but also as a way to collect data so that they could report back on what they encouraged their employees to do during these really challenging times. Now, knowing that PwC are pretty progressive with these things, I thought it'd be great to then bring what I built for them, improve on it, and make it available to everyone. So later in 2021, I launched an iOS and an Android application where anyone could come and they could set themselves a challenge, not just across well-being and physical exercise, but also across environment, across nutrition. And the application itself was connected to Strava, to Apple Health, to Google Fit, but also to 17,000 UK registered charities, so that any challenge could be a fundraiser. And that way we could actually track a participant's contribution, how much money they've raised, and so on. And I started to see the name of that application appearing in annual reports. And so this is now, where are we now? Sort of early 2022. So I started looking at the first time in sort of any real detail at the way that companies report on the good that they're doing for planet and their people. And I learned that every company reports in a very different format, over hundreds of pages. Often, I think actually we did some analysis on this. The average FTSE 100 sustainability report is about 130 pages long. So it's really lengthy. They're targeted at investors, which of course is a really important cohort. But we started to ask ourselves, who else is looking for this information? Who else wants to know what an organization is doing across the environment, across diversity and inclusion, and so on? And an audience that really stood out to us, having had conversations with university careers teams, with young people, was Gen Z. It was students, it was graduates, it was the incoming workforce who increasingly in their research process for looking for an employer was digging deep into this stuff. So that is what led me to focus on the work that I'm doing now, which is very much around the topic of today's conversation, which is trying to connect young talent with values-aligned employers. So I'm going to whiz you through a presentation and a few slides, and then I'll give you a tour of how we can kind of actually help young talent identify values-aligned employers, and then we can open up for some questions. So I'd first like to share why a couple of other platforms in our space were launched, and they're both platforms that we have a huge amount of respect for, but they both spotted a need and an opportunity early on. So in 2002, Reid Hoffman saw that young talent were taking to the internet to search for jobs. And of course, LinkedIn brought all of these job listings into a single place. In 2007, Robert Homan spotted a trend towards job seekers researching company reviews before applying for a job. And of course, Glassdoor, I'm sure you're all familiar with, brings all of these into a single place. And no doubt, both of these platforms are go-to resources for all talent and indeed employers today. But young talent now care deeply about the planet, they care about diversity, they care about inclusion, and they generally care about doing the right thing. So just as in 2007, talent would browse the web for company and former employee reviews, today they're doing their homework around an employer's values, their sustainability, their DEI. And a report from 2023 revealed that actually 83% of Gen Z candidates will go to an employer's website to look for such information, but most won't find it there. They'll have to go much deeper into these really lengthy PDF reports that I have spoken about, and more than 50% of young talent are doing that at the moment. And so that is why we built Window, because there simply had to be an open and user-friendly platform that brings all of this information into one place and makes it accessible and digestible, and we are that go-to resource. And when we started out, or when this was sort of an idea in my head in 2022, there were the occasional reports from Deloitte, McKinsey, and the likes talking about the importance of these topics to Gen Z. Certainly enough research out there to warrant us committing all of our time to building a solution. But today there's a lot more in the headlines about young talent, their values, sustainability, DEI. And what makes us proud at Window is that we're now getting featured in amongst them with reputable publications like the Financial Times, Forbes, World Economic Forum, and so on. And they come to us asking for our leadership and our insights as well. And if employer insights is of interest, please follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we push most of this stuff out. So the problem today that we've kind of identified, which EY summed up pretty nicely in a report recently, they said today people are leaving jobs because employers aren't being transparent enough about their values, sustainability, DEI, and employee well-being at the point of talent attraction. And EY then kindly sort of spotlighted Window as being the place that clearly communicates these topics to talent pools in an engaging format. And a report from Paul Polman, who's the former CEO of Unilever, revealed that actually 50% of young talent that are going into work, that have gone into work, have left after a relatively short period of time because they realize that the employer's values are not aligned to their own. That is, of course, disruptive for young talent, but it's also a really expensive problem for employers. On the right here, this is a really conservative estimate, but for a company that employs 100 graduates, and for the companies that we're working with, some of them hire 5,000 graduates on a yearly basis. But for a company that hires 100 graduates, they are spending or losing £200,000 to £1 million every year in attracting and then having to replace the wrong talent for them. But there is talk about this and the importance of values. So we know that young talent are starting to do their homework. We understand the processes that young talent will go through. So first is going to a jobs board where they put in the role or the sector they're looking to go into. But the problem with many of these, and we've done some pretty deep analysis on this as well, is that at best, they will only actually promote or publish about 30% of an employer's early career opportunities. They sort of cherry pick certain options. And also they have very limited information about the employer themselves. So that means that young talent are then having to go to that prospective employer's website to dig deep into the topics that they care about, right? And to do their own research, whether that's to be really well prepared for interview preparations or because they actually want to work out whether or not that employer is a good employer for them. So they'll dig deep on the website. and they will go into different PDF reports. And then lastly, of course, there are multiple third-party platforms that young talent will use. I've mentioned Glassdoor. We know that young people are taking, or everyone's taking to AI to ask these sorts of questions. But an interesting stat, which has been backed up actually by 2 different surveys that we've done, a quarter of young talent will go to Wikipedia and go to a company's page and look at controversies. They want to know what mistakes, what challenges organizations are making. So we know that it's a time-consuming and a pretty frustrating process to have to go through all of this, and particularly difficult to actually compare organizations side by side on certain metrics. So that is where we come in through a number of offerings. Firstly, on the left is something we launched, we actually built just over the summer, which is what we are pretty confident the most up-to-date, exhaustive and user-friendly jobs board powered by the data that we've got. Currently covering the 80 top rated organizations on Window in consulting, tech, finance, and law, but we will be going into other sectors soon. And of those 80 organizations that we are kind of tracking, we have over 2,000 early career opportunities spanning school level, apprenticeships, insight days, internships, placements, and full-time roles. And one of the sort of features that makes this really unique is that it's filterable by values. So young talent can come to that platform and they can say, look, I'm specifically interested in working for an organization that's doing really well with work-life balance or gender equality or LGBTQ inclusion or for the environment. And we can actually say, well, look, these organizations are doing well. And then through deeper filters, they can identify an opportunity that's right for them too. In the middle, we have what we started with, which is our sustainability, DEI, and wellbeing profiles. So this is taking all of that data out of those really lengthy PDF reports and putting it into a standardized format where you can come and you can compare over 600 of the largest organizations in UK, US, France, and Germany. So we've got every company in the FTSE 250, the Times Top 100 graduate employers, the Fortune 100, and CAC 40 and DAX 40. And sort of easily accessible data for you to look at, and going back as far as 2017, because what you'll find on a company's website or in their own PDF reports is they might tell you, this year, this is where we're at with our greenhouse gas emissions, or this is where we're at with our LGBTQ representation, but they won't go all the way back to 2017, which really tells a story about the journey that they're on as well. And if you start to Google, for example, HSBC diversity, JP Morgan inclusion, you will start to see Window as well as the first third-party platform listed. So Google's kind of recognizing that we're becoming a bit of an authority on this. The last thing is we constantly push out, I mentioned LinkedIn and so on, we constantly push out insights, checklists, guides, leaderboards to help young talent really identify what best looks like. And so we've got a section on our site which I will have a QR code to later as well. Now, throughout our journey, and really at the core of every decision that we make, is the early adopter community that we've built, and we speak to them daily. We've got a Gen Z advisory board which is made up of largely sort of society leaders, and right at the top of the community, of which has reached about 55,000 early adopters now, sit over 1,000 leaders who are either this year or last year's society presidents, chairmen, founders, committee members, and they look after over 300 different societies in the country, with a bit of a focus on ESG, diversity and inclusion, finance, tech, consultancy, law, and business. And we survey this audience and their networks to shape our own future, the future of the platform, and the tools that we provide to all young talent, but also as a way to actually educate organizations on Gen Z expectations and processes when it comes to evaluating potential employers. And in our most recent survey, of which I'm going to share some data shortly, we captured over 700 responses, and nearly 60% came from the societies that were within our network. And in terms of demographic breakdown, 51% of responses came from women, 40% from ethnic minorities, 13% from people that identify as LGBTQ+, same percentage for lower socioeconomic background, and 10% of all respondents identify as having a disability. And in the bottom left, you can see where the responses came from when it comes to the societies, with the majority coming from consulting, finance, and business there. In addition to this, last month we brought 130 university societies to our flagship event, which is called Preside, hosted at Bloomberg's European HQ in London, and it's actually one of the largest gatherings of its kind in the UK, and it has representation from 27 different cities spanning 40 universities, and between the attendees, they have a student membership of about 45,000, which is a pretty incredible force for shaping the future of work and for getting a good understanding of the processes they're going through at the moment. And at that event, in addition to our survey, we actually gathered some additional data. And given the topic of today's conversation, I wanted to share some of those findings with you. So starting on the right, 67% of young talent would sacrifice salary to work with a company that aligns with their values. And 69% would leave a company if their values weren't aligned, which is obviously more than the actual number that Paul Polman reported of 50% already doing that. We then asked young talent what they would like to see companies advocating for, and these on the left are the results. More than half would expect an employer to speak out publicly in support of gender equality, racial justice, social mobility, LGBTQ+ rights, and disability inclusion. And in line with the stat that I shared earlier about Wikipedia controversies, 57% of young talent expect employers to be open and honest about their mistakes. This is something that we actually heard early on from our community. So on our company profiles, we now have included a space where companies can add mistakes and challenges and link to the kind of how they're going to rectify them. 62% of respondents want flexibility in their working hours or to have the ability to work in a hybrid or remote capacity. 88% feel that employers should disclose a graduate salary or salary range upfront on their website. And our analysis, by the way, reveals that of the 600 plus full-time roles that we have on our tracker, only 18% have a salary listed. So it's an area where employers have sort of fallen short at the moment. 51% of students deem a potential employer's commitment to the environment to be a priority when evaluating potential employers. And interestingly, 70% are looking for a role that involves some element of sustainability, not focused on, but involves some element of sustainability. And by the way, in case there are any international students on this in this meeting today, we do understand the challenges that you face and often the frustrations. We know that companies aren't being transparent about whether or not their opportunity might come with visa sponsorship. So we did some live polling at Preside, and 46.2% of the 150 young leaders that attended were international students. And 95% of all attendees agreed that employers should clearly indicate whether an early career opportunity includes visa sponsorship. And this is one of our next missions. And to demonstrate that, there is now actually a filter on our tracker for visa sponsorship considered. And we're delighted to have convinced one of our partners, Bloomberg, to pick up this label and to add it to all of their qualifying opportunities. So with all of this data, and by the way, there's a whole load more data that we collected there in that survey, but off the back of it, we identified 8 core areas where we feel, or where young talent feel most passionately, which you can see on this slide. And we've sort of fed this into a guide to help candidates to find values-aligned employers. And these values on the bottom left represent the priorities that today's graduates seek in potential employers. For each of these values, we then developed practical guides, checklists of key information, window features to help young people identify leading companies. And here's just an example of one of the pages from within the report, taking the racial justice value. So to help you evaluate employers on each value, we developed checklists for things to look out for on the right of each page. And at the top of these checklists are the least frequently reported items, making it easier to identify the leaders in these areas. And with each value, we've given you a top 10 to 20 companies in different sectors, and then within their quick links through to their open opportunities or their profiles on Window. And this also, by looking at their profiles on Window, they'll get a good understanding of what best in practice really looks like. And we do feel, based on feedback from students who've landed roles that are right for them, we truly believe that it is this level of detail and research that can really help young talent not only stand out, but actually identify a suitable employer for them. Here's just one other example speaking of salary transparency, where we highlight the top graduate employers that do provide clarity on salary in their jobs. We actually surveyed the Preside attendees, and 20% of attendees said they would not even apply for a role if there was not a salary listed. And we've broken that down by different demographics as well. So an interesting one, something we're hoping companies might start acting on. And again, frustrating that, that's only 18% of opportunities that do list this at the moment, despite 62% feeling strongly that salaries should be disclosed. So all of this stuff that I've kind of spoken about sits in a single page on our website, which is called Get Ahead. Please feel free to scan the QR code. Everything is on Windows, completely open, no need to leave your email address. So within there, you'll get quick access to the 2,000 early career opportunities that we've got, the 600 plus sustainable companies that we have for sustainability and DEI profiles. We've also got leaderboards, which are updated every night because new data is fed into it daily. That can give you a pretty clear understanding. We've got about 50 to 100 of them. And you can get a pretty good understanding of who's leading in which sectors based on different criteria. Essential checklists you'll find in there. And then bottom right, something we've added recently on request from the community is how best could young talent use the data that they find on a window profile in order to kind of demonstrate that they've done their research and that their values are aligned when it comes to applications and writing cover letters. So we've given some examples in there, but we're actually right at the start of turning that into an AI tool as well. So you can say, I'm interviewing with this, or I'm applying for this company. These are my values. How do we match and what does that look like? So on the topic of AI, one last bit just to sort of tease is an AI career advisor that we're probably 2/3 of the way through developing, where we would feed in all of our sustainability, DEI, early career opportunities data, and within a very short period of time, Winnie will be able to have a conversation with people, understand a little bit about their background, their demographic, their expertise, their skill set, their preferred working environment, and so on. And in a short period of time, we'll be able to identify a values-aligned employer that has an opportunity that matches their criteria. There we go. Let me end this, and I'll just give you a quick look at, I believe I'm still sharing. Can you now see our website?
Yep.
Yes, excellent. So this is kind of like our homepage, just so people can know how to navigate around. For every company, this is actually filtered by transparency. So the more data that a company has and is pushing out there, the higher up they will appear. So let's have a look at KPMG as an example. You'll see on the left here different links through to their environment data, DEI data, and health and wellness. And within each profile, which has been designed actually really by Gen Z and obviously for Gen Z, short little tiles, bite-sized information, pulling out qual and quant data, including things like quotes from someone in a relevant position, 3 strategic priorities within each section, net zero target dates, certain goals that they've set. These are updated every time they release a new report, achievements, and then the actual data for those that want to dig really deep into renewable energy usage, greenhouse gas emissions by different geography, intensity ratios, and so on. DEI is where we've gone really quite exhaustive. And so we cover everything from gender, ethnic minorities, LGBTQ+, disability, veterans, socioeconomic, and at different levels of the organization. So overall, senior leadership, board level, also supplier diversity. And so just a quick look at this. Within each section, you get their breakdown, you get targets. So this is specifically around female, pay gap data, awards and recognition specifically within the gender space, and then the same again for ethnicity, ethnic minorities, LGBTQ+. And you can actually compare organizations side by side here. So KPMG versus, let's have a look at HSBC on a different sector. You could chuck in Boston Consulting Group, and you can see exactly how organizations are doing side by side. And then the opportunities tracker. So this is where you can come in, you can say, I'm looking for full-time role, and you could look for roles in, we were looking at, let's have a look at consulting, and then you can filter by values. So you can say, I specifically want to work for an organization that's doing great things for gender equality. And then that will highlight to you roles with organizations that are doing great things within that space, and we flag the values they've earned. And again, these values are not what the company says their values are. It's actually driven by the data that we've got. The apply link will go straight through to their application page, and for any opportunities where the applications aren't yet open, students can hit notify me, and then they drop in their email address, and then the minute that application opens, and this is updated every single day, the minute it opens, we will send an email and it'll be in their inbox. So yes, there we go. That is Window. That is how we can hopefully help young talent and eventually all talent to find values aligned employers. But as you rightly said at the beginning, Nicola, I do appreciate that it's difficult to be choosy upon leaving university, which is probably why I think that 50% of young talent that go into job end up leaving, because they're, it's at that point when they've got something under their belt and they can probably be a bit more choosy around values and so on. But there we go.
Ollie, that's just completely just blown me away. I have no doubt it has many other people in the room. I've got so many questions. First of all, actually, I just want to observe how useful, just to hear, as you might imagine, your life as an entrepreneur, actually, and somebody who you said very early on, the first thing you tried didn't work. What a fantastic thing to share with us, because that's life, isn't it? And we can see even from what you've shared, the main focus of today about well, is that Window is that actually it's evolved, hasn't it? Over the period of time that you've been involved in it. And then secondly, I think the methodology that you shared for students who are still students, they can learn a lot about how you kept digging and digging for data and gathering data and bringing in various stakeholders, companies, organizations, student societies and so forth. So fantastic. So a couple of things I wanted to ask were, do you think that the work that you're doing actually has started to shape? Can you see that it started to shape how organizations are what they're doing? So is it a little bit of a, people are actually systemically gathering this now, we really need to pull our finger out a bit more? Do you feel that you see that already?
Yeah, so the organizations that we are dealing with and that we want to be dealing with are giants, right? They employ 10,000 employees plus, and they are very difficult to shift. However, I did say one example, with that visa sponsorship piece, we have managed to convince Bloomberg to now be transparent about that.
Yeah.
And the kind of key takeaways that I took from that survey is that companies will go above and beyond to attract and retain customers, right? They will do everything they can. They'll be quite honest about their product. People put out these reviews and so on. But it feels that they are not necessarily doing that when it comes to actually attracting talent. And so, yes, absolutely. My goal is to try to amplify the voice of young talent around, the things they care about, the values, the wanting companies to speak out publicly in support of social mobility, racial justice, and so on. And to kind of say, look, if you really want to attract the right talent that's going to stay with you for a period of, for a decent period of time that you're going to be able to retain, then this is what best practice looks like. So we do, with our subscribed organizations, we provide them with the survey responses to that, but we also provide them with 14 leading practices for sustainability communications, not through Window, but just through their own channels on their own website. And we give them examples of what best looks like. And we are starting to see, yes, companies, whether it's through our own efforts or whether it's just because they're kind of waking up to what young talent expects and what we all expect probably, but companies are becoming better at reporting that. Having said that, we do have the Fortune 100, so the largest 100 US organizations on the platform, and who knows what's going to happen over the coming 4 years in terms of reporting and transparency. I think interestingly, we are connected to some US based students, and they seem they still seem to, have values, and they care about the environment, and they care about doing the right thing. So it'll be interesting to see whether companies over there kind of pull back or continue and just change wording and so on. So yes, hopefully what we can start to do is very much encourage companies to be more transparent and to change the way that they communicate this stuff to young talent.
Yeah. I mean, you as a sort of objective third party is just invaluable, of course, and what an opportunity you spotted, and again, great example for us. In fact, so Darren's put, I don't know if you want to actually ask it, or I'll just read it from your chat. Again, I know there are a couple of MBA students in the audience or alumni, so your question's really apposite. So do you want to ask it, or?
Yeah, yeah, it's just interesting through Google Analytics. Are you seeing also a surge in people who are kind of in their mid to late cycle of their career, showing an interest in this data? Yeah, because I'm finding as a consumer myself, and I speak to lots of people. People as consumers are being a lot more scrutinizing in who they buy from, around ethical supply chain, and that sort of stuff's coming out. We had a really interesting talk recently around ethical marketing and highlighting Nike's kind of virtue signaling through their advertising and actually trying to mask their kind of pretty suspect supply chain. So it's kind of people are kind of as consumers kind of really scrutinizing companies now as well. And I was just interested if you are seeing a surge in people who are kind of older people actually landing on your site as well.
Yeah, we are, Darren, across the board, actually. I agree, whether it's people researching which brands they want to buy from, whether it's young talent researching which organizations they want to work for. We're also seeing a lot of professionals within organizations coming to have a look at how they stack up and what their competition are doing. So yeah, we definitely are. Our focus was initially to kind of cater for younger audiences, which is why our early careers tracker is early careers versus later. But absolutely, we'd have intentions to kind of put this out there to everyone, because we are seeing everyone using it. We see, we get tagged in quite a lot of posts on LinkedIn and things like this, where it's just people wanting to share information. And as mentioned, some of the press that pick it up, the insights that are there. So like you, I think it's of interest to not just young people, but a lot of people. It seems like maybe within some organizations at leadership level, it's not, the interest isn't quite there yet, or perhaps where it needs to be. But what I think is really encouraging is that, Gen Z are going to make up a third of the global workforce before the end of the decade. And they are starting to make these demands. They're going to be our leaders. They're going to be our investors. And so that encourages me that companies will start to generally just, do the right thing across the board over time.
Great. In fact, the next presentation, it may be that you say, the next question, you say that actually that information is on your website. But there's a question here about how do you pinpoint and track how an organization is doing on, for example, diversity inclusion. Do you provide the detail behind your work? Is that able to be viewed about what it is you're looking at, the data that you're looking at?
So what we are doing at present is we are making it easier for everyone to come and find the information that companies are publicly reporting. So we're extracting all of the data from their diversity reports, their sustainability reports, their annual reports, their own websites. But we also look at certain indices that we deem to be reputable. And we also look at certain public statements from around the world as well that companies have signed on to. And that is then populated onto their profile. So we are not, other than by transparency, we're not ranking organizations. We are not saying, this organization is more diverse or better than that organization. You can kind of make your own decisions based off of the data that we've got through our leaderboards. Yeah. If diversity is, a metric that could more easily be measured than something like inclusion, where whether people feel like they truly belong within an organization. But there are certain data points. It's kind of, we're leaving it for people to make their own mind up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in time, that's where Winnie can start to do a lot of the work for young talent, and I think increasingly that's going to have to become the way that we go, rather than like allowing people to research. But yeah, so the information that you see on there is actual data that they have reported. There's a contract of trust that companies are putting out that, X% of their board is black, that they are putting actual data out there.
Yeah.
We have had some instances where people have come particularly around environmental data and go, that just can't be possible. And so we've flagged it with organizations. But yeah, so we rank organizations largely by transparency. So the more information they put out there, even if it, like JP Morgan's an example here, they report that they have 0% people with a disability on their board. And for that, we actually commend them for putting out there that they have 0%, because no one else does. And so that's the piece that we're trying to drive, and that's the way that we kind of rank organizations.
That's
but if
really
you want to, just lastly, if a whoever asked the question, if they wanted to see who's doing particularly well in a particular sector for, I don't know, ethnic minorities, then our leaderboards is the place to go, because you can filter by ethnic minorities, and then you have 8 different leaderboards, all filterable by sector: most awarded, most vocal corporate advocate, highest percentage of board level, highest percentage of senior leaders overall, most transparent specifically within that sector. So you can work it out.
Yeah, that's really helpful, because sort of the second part of the question was, how do you know they do what they say? And I guess what you're saying is, well, in some cases there are stats available, for example, on the diversity of board or whatever. But in other cases, you're saying, well, actually, you rank them lower if they don't actually share that sort of data.
Yeah, but there are some other interesting data points that you can look at there. So, and I think it's Deloitte US and maybe Bain, but definitely Deloitte. So every year large companies will put out employee opinion surveys, and that is for their employees to kind of anonymously share whether they can bring their authentic self to work, whether they feel like there are senior leaders that look like them, and load of questions. And what Deloitte do, a lot of companies will just say 83% of our employees say they can bring their authentic self to work. But what you can't see there is, okay, well, what percentage of the LGBTQ plus community or people with a disability have answered that question? And that's where Deloitte will go deep. And that gives you a pretty good sentiment of whether or not they are building inclusive workplaces. The other, on window profiles, so we had a look at KPMG's, if the diversity piece is, they might set a target of having 15% of their employees to identify as LGBTQ plus by 2025. And what you'll be able to work out from us is, are they on course to doing that? Because you can have a look at their data going back to 2017. And you've just got to assume, we've all got to assume, that what they publicly report out there and put on Companies House is factual.
Yeah. You mentioned yourself, again, I'm going to keep asking questions, and in the hope that other people don't feel shy. This is a unique opportunity to ask the amazing Ollie Coles exactly what you want, and I'm sure you're really happy to go off topic as well, Ollie.
Hit me up, test me.
Yeah. There's a question, actually. I don't know if you can see the chat. Could you please tell a little more about the indices in your websites, like FTSE and DAX? I don't know if you need a bit more focus on that question, but do you want to give it a go?
That's fine. Yeah, no. So what we have, when we built Window, we had built a platform that behind the scenes, which every company has access to, there's this really extensive data hub where we can input data, right, across all of their sustainability, DEI, and so on. And we had built that, and of course, we then had no companies on it. So we're like, right, where do we start so that we can build relationships with Oxford Brookes Business School and with Oxford University down the road and Cambridge and so on, and actually provide value to young talent? So we thought, let's go after the largest organizations initially in the UK, which is the FTSE 100. So they are the largest organizations financially in the UK. And so we started with them, and then we moved to the US and did exactly the same. And then we did the same with DAX, which is the Germany top 40 companies, and the CAC 40, which is the top 40 in France. And then, of course, yeah, the Times Top 100 graduate employers made perfect sense as well. So they tend to be the companies that hire the most graduates. So we've had to start there, but we very much also appreciate that not everyone wants to work for a FTSE 100 massive organization. I'm a prime example of that. And so we do want to, gradually start to welcome on smaller organizations. The challenge that we'd have with smaller organizations is that right now, many of them aren't actually sharing a lot of this data. But that is going to change. There are certain regulations coming in that's going to require 55,000 organizations in Europe to start sharing more information about their sustainability, their diversity, and inclusion. So yeah, hopefully, Sajjad, that sort of explains a little bit about the FTSE and the DAX.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, sort of building on that topic, that question around, you logically went to the large organizations for lots of different reasons. They hire the most graduates. There's presumably more data available. You yourself have been, a Brooks student who, as it happens, went sort of quite entrepreneurial early on. So I wanted to ask sort of two questions, really. I mean, I think you've got a lot of insight in terms of those that are actually going to start their own business, the sorts of things they might want to be thinking about early on in terms of their own reporting as a small business. And secondly, just picking up on that point that not everybody ends up looking at some of the big organizations about where they want to work. And of course, with the lack of sort of information or often maybe quite haphazard information that those sorts of organizations provide, what would be your sort of, I suppose, more sort of informal advice to those that are looking at some of the, the really small sort of organizations, based on your experience of obviously being an entrepreneur yourself, and sort of things that they might want to be looking for when they're having to do their own work, actually, because your platform doesn't help in those smaller ones?
Yeah, so the first one about smaller organizations reporting and putting this kind of information out there, I would say that so good organizations, there are a number of organizations that would have joined B Corp as an example, which for smaller organizations is a pretty good stamp of approval that they are doing things the right way across all of their corporate social responsibility. I also like the smallest organization subscriber of ours on Window has about 10 employees. So there are some small companies here, but their workforce changes so much, or not so much, but it can change so much. If they hire 20 people in a year, then their demographic, their metrics are going to be all over the place. So it can sometimes be a little bit inconsistent when you look at the actual data. But I think with smaller organizations, and even when looking to sort of land a job with them, it's about getting in there and having those conversations. Yeah. And I think certainly I have been employed before once, and straight out of university, and I identified a small advertising and marketing agency that I was quite keen to work for, and I put myself out there to have a conversation, and the owner of it was keen to have a chat. So I think small organizations, and we get approached similarly from students pretty constantly about whether we've got any opportunities, and I'm always very happy to have conversations with people. And I think smaller organizations can be more flexible. Like the large graduate employers all have these really strict processes and programs and application processes that you need to go through, which many people want to do. But smaller organizations, if you reach out and if you actually think, I've done my homework here and I really like this company and I'm interested in working for them, here's a bit about me, can I please buy you a coffee? I think you would find that many people would actually be happy to take you up on that opportunity. Yeah. And one other thing I learned at Preside last month, which came from the president of the ESG Society at Warwick University, he said that within sustainability, if there's young talent that want to go into the area of sustainability, he has tended to find that people that work in that space are very open to conversations, particularly if it's around discussing sustainability. So any professionals to like using LinkedIn as a way to reach out to them and because, you know, as young talent, you would have identified that person as a person you really want to talk to for a particular reason, voice it, and you might be surprised that they just say, look, it would be great to chat. And, you know, myself and my business partner are always happy to jump on the call with people that want to, you know, talk about something that we're also passionate about.
Yeah.
So, but I think, yeah, and it's those smaller organizations that can also make a huge amount of difference, right? I think 99% of businesses in the UK are really small organizations, and they, yeah, they can do pretty amazing things.
Yeah, and I think you and I would assume that, you know, those that are young people, let's say graduates who are really passionate about this, that the questions will flow naturally when if they've taken, you know, got the courage to go and contact somebody who's running one of these
Yeah.
small organizations. But I think in the absence of knowing what to ask, I think you know, in fact, your offer, your website gives a pretty good sense of the sorts of things they may want to ask in that conversation. Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah, exactly. It gives you, you know, if you were like me, I was looking to go into the world of marketing, and, you know, I could go onto our site, have a look at WPP and see what they are doing. And yeah, it could give me some teasers of things to ask. Someone else has asked
Yeah,
questions.
about your journey, really.
Yeah. No, I didn't study ICT. I read history at Oxford. I studied history at Oxford Brookes. And what's happened there was I've always enjoyed drawing and designing. And before I joined Oxford Brookes, I was doing some traveling with some friends. And rather than keeping a diary, I did a drawing every day. And when I then came back with, you know, a book of drawings, and off the back of that, I had friends asking me to design them tattoos and things like this, and some of those drawings are what I ended up putting on t-shirts, and so I ended up sort of making this clothing label called Pink Imp at university and selling it that way. And so that was kind of like my first entrance into the world of entrepreneurship. And then from there, from Brookes, I went to work for this little agency that I mentioned, and a friend of mine who I went to school with, who I'd known since I was 13, who was at Oxford University, got in touch and said, I don't know what it is that we're going to do yet, but we need to go into business together. And his belief in me, actually, I didn't even think of myself as being someone that was, until I spent a few years with him building it. And then after that, you know, 3 or 4 years back into working for an organization. And so ever since then, I have been jumping from idea to idea. And yeah, certainly have had, you know, a number of really challenging situations. I've had a few mistakes that probably aren't to be shared here, but you know, I've learned a fair amount in trying to set up these businesses, and I've spent 18 months, you know, preparing business plans and putting together plans and go-to-market strategies for businesses that just, for one reason or another, can't even get started. Like, so it's an interesting journey to go down, and I think I started it, to answer your question, just because I like creating things. I really like creating things. I do like solving problems. My values myself changed when it came to the pandemic, and when I was able to do some good for nurses, that's when I was like, and at the same time I had I became a dad, and so I started to think,
So I think we've got Ollie's frozen, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it's us. Yeah. Okay.
around
All right,
that.
Ollie froze. But I'm delighted to say, literally only in the last couple of minutes, up until now, it's been completely fluid and undisturbed. But I think we got the gist of
Cool.
you've shifted.
I was waffling.
Well, the thing
That's
is,
why it froze.
you're starting to speak about your journey and your values and how you sort of evolved. And I think that also is a really useful message for particularly those in the room who are the early part of their life, in fact, not just professional life, that things do evolve. And I think, you know, that you sort of shared that, you took opportunity where you saw it, where you wanted to add value, where you thought you could add value. So yeah, great. And so you got some endorsement in the chat as well, about feeling some common souls in the room around feeling the same about creativity and so forth. So we're actually we're up of time, out of time, and I always enjoy this sort of session, but Ollie, it's completely blown my mind what you've managed to offer to young people and organisations actually. The opportunity to show young talent what they're up to, and for young talent to navigate that. So I've completely enjoyed it. I have no doubt that our students and alumni in the room. So we have been joined by some alumni and MBA alumni. Ollie, thank you so much for giving us your time. I've been inspired, and I think you're going to get some more hits on your web pages. I have no doubt. Looking forward to hearing the next part of the journey at some point. But many thanks again from all of us, and see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you all.